A courtroom is a theatre where lives are rewritten. For Kendra Palmer, it was the stage for her execution. Her millionaire husband, Graham, a man who could buy influence as easily as he bought a new sports car, sat across from her. He wasn't just trying to divorce her. He was trying to erase her. And his ultimate weapon wasn't his high-powered lawyer or his endless fortune. It was the woman sitting behind him, his mistress, Bianca Reed, poised to take Kendra's place. The deck was stacked, the game was rigged, and Kendra was about to lose the only thing that mattered, her son. But in the cold, impartial world of family law, sometimes the most devastating weapon isn't a lie, but a single simple question. The air in Family Court Department 12 was thick with the ghosts of broken promises. It was a sterile, impersonal room of polished mahogany and beige walls designed to leach the emotion out of human tragedy. Yet for Kendra, Ken Palmer, the room felt electric, with a current of pure, undiluted hatred flowing from the man she had once loved. Graham Palmer sat at the opposing table, a portrait of effortless power. His suit was a custom-tailored Tom Ford, a whisper of charcoal grey that probably cost more than the car Ken now drove. His watch, a Patek Philippe, caught the fluorescent light as he gestured a subtle glint of obscene wealth. He wasn't just a man. He was an institution, the founder of Apex Equity Partners, a firm that devoured smaller companies with the casual rapacity of a shark. And now he was trying to devour her. His lawyer, Franklin Davies, was a perfect reflection of his client. Silver-haired, with a voice as smooth and cold as river stones, he exuded an aura of expensive, inevitable victory. They were a matched set. Power and its enabler. Behind them, in the first row of the gallery, sat Bianca Reed. Bianca was the living embodiment of Graham's betrayal. 26 years old, with hair the color of spun gold, and a figure honed by personal trainers, and a life of leisure, she was the upgrade Graham had chosen. She wore a cream-colored Chanel dress, the picture of serene elegance. She met Ken's gaze across the courtroom and offered a small, pitying smile. It was a calculated gesture designed to say, "Look at you. You've lost. I am the future." Ken felt a tremor run through her hands and clasped them tightly in her lap to still them. Her own attire felt like a costume of defeat, a simple navy blue dress, the best thing she owned that wasn't paid for by Graham's blood money and shoes she'd bought on sale years ago. Her lawyer, Anya Sharma, was a stark contrast to Davies. Young, sharp-eyed, and radiating a fierce intelligence, Anya worked for a firm that took on cases based on merit, not retainer size. She was Ken's only shield against the storm Graham was about to unleash. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Helen Carmichael entered the room. She was a woman in her late 50s, with a stern, impassive face framed by short, sensible grey hair. She had a reputation for being meticulous fair and utterly immune to the theatrics of high-powered lawyers. Ken clung to that reputation like a life raft. Mr. Davies, the judge, said, her voice devoid of warmth. "You may begin." Davies rose, a symphony of controlled movement. "Thank you, Your Honor. We are here today to determine the sole legal and physical custody of one Leo Palmer, age 7. While a painful and difficult process, the evidence will unequivocally show that the best interests of the child, the North Star of this court, are served by granting custody to my client, Mr. Graham Palmer." He paced slowly, his voice a mesmerizing cadence. "The evidence will show a pattern of instability, emotional volatility, and neglect on the part of the mother, Ms. Kendra Palmer. A woman who, since the unfortunate but necessary dissolution of this marriage began, has created a chaotic and unhealthy environment for her son." Ken flinched as if struck. Unfortunate but necessary, He made it sound like a corporate merger gone wrong, not a man shattering his family for a younger model. We will present evidence of Miss Palmer's erratic behavior. Davies continued, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. Her screaming fits her unpredictable moods. We will show that Mr. Palmer, on the other hand, can offer young Leo something his mother cannot: stability, a world-class education, a secure, structured home, a life free from the emotional turmoil that has sadly defined his mother's recent conduct. It was a masterpiece of narrative construction. He was taking Ken's raw, justifiable pain, the agony of discovering Graham's year-long affair, the screaming arguments when she found receipts for hotels in Paris and diamond bracelets she'd never received, and twisting it into a character flaw, a diagnosis of unfitness. Anya placed a calming hand on Ken's arm. "Breathe," she whispered. "This is what they do. They build a monster. We just have to tear it down." Davies gestured towards Bianca. "Furthermore, Mr. Palmer is now in a stable, loving relationship with Ms. Bianca Reed, a woman of impeccable character, who is ready and eager to provide a nurturing and supportive presence in Leo's life. A presence, we will argue, that has been sorely lacking. The audacity was breathtaking. He was presenting the adulteress as a maternal upgrade." Ken looked at Bianca again, who now wore an expression of solemn concern, as if she truly believed the lies being spun on her behalf. Ken's mind reeled back to the day her world imploded. It wasn't a dramatic confrontation. It was a quiet Tuesday. Graham was on a business trip to Geneva. Leo was at school. Ken was sorting through the laundry when Graham's gym bag fell from the top of the closet. A small velvet box tumbled out. Her heart had leaped for a foolish second, thinking it was a surprise for her. Inside was a delicate platinum necklace with a diamond bee. Her blood had run cold. A quick, frantic search of his study computer, a password she knew from years of shared life, Leomyson 18, and there it was. An entire universe of deceit. Emails, travel itineraries for 2 photos of Graham and Bianca on a yacht in Santorini, laughing, kissing, living a life he had kept hidden from her. The confrontation that followed was not a screaming fit. It was the primal roar of a woman whose life had been a lie. He hadn't denied it. He'd been almost bored by her discovery. "Don't be so dramatic, Kendra," he'd said, adjusting his tie. "These things happen. We just grew apart. I was going to tell you. That was Graham. He didn't just cheat. He gaslit. He didn't just lie. He rewrote history. Now, in this cold courtroom, he was doing it again. But this time, the prize wasn't just his freedom. It was her son." "We will hear testimony from Mr. Palmer," Davies concluded, turning to face the judge. "From Ms. Reed. And we will see, Your Honor, that the choice is not just clear. It is imperative. For the sake of the child." He sat down. The silence in the room was heavy. Ken felt the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes on her, judging her, dissecting the caricature Davies had just painted. The unstable wife, the hysterical mother, the woman who was about to lose everything. Anya stood. Her voice was a stark contrast to Davies's clear, direct and without flourish. "Your Honor," she said, "what Mr. Davies calls instability, we call a mother's heartbreak. What he calls emotional turmoil, we call a natural reaction to profound betrayal. And what he calls the best interest of the child, we call a father's attempt to use his wealth and power to punish his wife for a divorce he initiated with his own infidelity. The evidence will show that Kendra Palmer is and has always been a dedicated, loving, and supremely capable mother. She is the parent who has attended every doctor's appointment, every parent-teacher conference, and every school play. She is the one who knows her son's fears, his dreams and his needs. We believe that by the end of this hearing, this court will see through the polished facade of Graham Palmer and recognize that the true stability in Leo's life resides with his mother. Anya's words were a small balm on Ken's raw nerves. But as she looked at Graham, who was whispering something to Davies with a confident smirk, she knew this was just the opening salvo. The real battle was about to begin, and Graham had come armed for total war. The petitioner calls Mr. Graham Palmer to the stand. Graham rose and walked to the witness box with the unhurried gait of a man who owned every room he entered. He was sworn in his hand on the Bible, a profane mockery in Ken's eyes. He settled into the chair, adjusted his microphone, and gave Judge Carmichael a deferential, charming smile. It was the same smile he'd used to charm her parents, to win over business rivals, to lull her into a false sense of security for 12 years. Davies began his direct examination, his questions, softballs lobbed for Graham to hit out of the park. Mr. Palmer, could you describe your relationship with your son? Leo is my world. Graham said, his voice resonating with carefully rehearsed sincerity. He's a bright, wonderful boy. I want nothing but the best for him. That's why we're here. And what do you believe is best for him? Stability, Graham said, repeating the theme. A calm, predictable environment where he can thrive. Unfortunately, that hasn't been possible lately. Why not? Davies prompted. His mother, Ken, she's been going through a difficult time, Graham said, his brow furrowed with feigned concern. Her moods are unpredictable. 1 minute she's fine, the next she's screaming, throwing things. Leo has seen it. He gets scared. He hides in his room. It's no environment for a child. Ken's knuckles were white where she gripped her pen. He was talking about the night she'd discovered a credit card bill for a $12,000 Cartier bracelet. She hadn't thrown things. She had thrown the bill onto his desk and screamed, "Who is she, Graham? Who is she?" He had watched her, his face a mask of cold indifference, before telling her to lower her voice so she wouldn't upset the boy. Can you give the court a specific example of this instability? Davies asked. Of course, Graham said, leaning forward. Just last month I arrived to pick Leo up for my scheduled weekend. Ken hadn't packed his bag. When I pointed this out, she flew into a rage, accusing me of all sorts of things. She refused to let me take him. Leo was crying. I had to leave without him to de-escalate the situation. I have a recording of the encounter. Davies nodded to the clerk, and a tinny, distorted audio file began to play. It was Ken's voice, high-pitched with distress. You can't just waltz in here whenever you please. Graham, the agreement says 6 p.m. It's 4:30. Leo has a play date with his friend Noah. You do this on purpose to disrupt his life. Then Graham's voice, calm and reasonable. Kendra, please, let's not do this in front of him. I just wanted a little extra time. There's no need for hysterics. The audio cut off. Davies let the silence hang in the air. The recording was a perfect manipulation. Graham had shown up early, knowing it would cause a conflict, and had started recording only when Ken was already upset. He had edited out his own provocations, his condescending tone, leaving only her frantic reaction. Anya was already writing furiously on her notepad. Provocation, edited recording, time-stamped texts to prove playdate. Davies wasn't finished. He projected a photo onto the screen. It showed the kitchen in their former home, a pot of what looked like burnt pasta on the stove, a wine bottle, and a half-empty glass on the counter. Mr. Palmer, do you recognize this scene? Yes, Graham sighed. I came home from a business dinner one evening to find this. Ken was asleep on the sofa. Leo was in his room, said he hadn't had dinner. The smoke alarm had been disabled. I was terrified something worse could have happened. This lie was even more insidious. Ken remembered that night perfectly. She had a terrible migraine. She'd made pasta for Leo, and in her pained haze had forgotten the pot on the stove for a minute too long. She hadn't been drinking. The wine bottle was from a dinner party 2 nights prior. She'd taken her migraine medication and had lain down on the sofa for a moment while Leo watched a cartoon. Graham had come home, taken that photo without waking her, and thrown the food away, ordering pizza for Leo, as if he were the savior. He had weaponized her illness. And this alleged neglect extends to Leo's health as well, doesn't it? Davies pressed on. Tragically, yes, Graham said, shaking his head. This was it. The attack Ken had dreaded most. Leo has a severe nut allergy, Graham explained to the court. Anaphylactic. He requires constant vigilance. A few months ago, Ken sent a cupcake to school for another child's birthday. She assured the teacher it was nut-free. It wasn't. There was cross-contamination from her baking supplies. Leo had a reaction. A mild one, thank God, because the teacher was alert. But he had to be given an EpiPen and taken to the hospital. I have the school nurse's report here. He produced the document. Every word of it was true, and that's what made it so devastating. It had been an accident, a horrible, terrifying mistake that had given Ken nightmares for weeks. She'd bought new flour, a new sifter, everything, but a trace must have remained in a reused baking tin. It was the kind of mistake that could happen to any parent, but in Graham's telling, it was proof of her unfitness. Davies drove the point home. So his mother, the person entrusted with his care, sent him to school with a food that could have killed him. Yes, Graham said the single word, an indictment. When it was Anya's turn to cross-examine, she approached the stand with a calm, measured pace. Mr. Palmer, she began, her voice even. You testified that you wished to provide Leo with stability. Is that correct? Absolutely. Is it stable for a child to have his father carry on a year-long affair behind his mother's back? Davies shot to his feet. Objection. Relevance. It speaks directly to the witness's character and his definition of stability. Your Honor, Anya countered. I'll allow it. Briefly, Judge Carmichael said, her eyes fixed on Graham. Graham's charming facade tightened. My personal life has no bearing on my ability to be a father. So the lies, the deception, the eventual destruction of your family home, you don't see that as a form of instability for your son, Anya pressed. My relationship with Kendra had been over for years. I stayed for Leo, Graham said, falling back on the classic cliché. The most stable thing I can do for him now is remove him from his mother's chaotic influence. Anya shifted gears. Let's talk about Leo's allergy. You presented the cupcake incident as evidence of neglect. It was, Graham stated flatly. Mr. Palmer, in the 7 years of Leo's life, how many allergic reactions has he had? I don't know the exact number. The number is 3, Mr. Palmer, Anya said, pulling out a file. The cupcake incident, 1 incident at a restaurant when he was 4, and 1 at a friend's birthday party when he was 5. Is that correct? That sounds about right. And who was with Leo on all 3 of those occasions? Who administered the EpiPen? Who rode in the ambulance with him? Who sat by his hospital bed? Graham was silent. He shifted in his seat. Was it you, Mr. Palmer? Anya's voice was like ice. Were you at that restaurant, or were you on a golf trip to Pebble Beach? Were you at that birthday party? Or were you at a board meeting in New York? I have a demanding career. Graham snapped his composure, cracking. I provide for my family. Ken handled the day-to-day. Precisely, Anya said, turning to the judge. She handled the day-to-day. She handled the terrifying moments and the mundane ones. She made one mistake which she is haunted by in 7 years of diligent care. You, Mr. Palmer, were simply absent. She let that word hang in the air before continuing. You testified that you disabled a smoke alarm. Is it not true, Mr. Palmer, that you yourself disabled it weeks prior because it kept going off when you seared steaks and you never fixed it? Graham's face flushed. I don't recall. And the audio recording of your confrontation with Ms. Palmer, your phone records show that you placed a call to Mr. Davies exactly 3 minutes before you began that recording. Were you perhaps receiving instructions on how to provoke your wife and capture her reaction for this hearing? Objection, Davies yelled. Sustained, the judge said, but she made a note on her pad. The point had been made. Graham Palmer, the master manipulator, was being unmasked layer by layer, but Ken knew this was far from over. He had one more card to play, a beautiful blonde and utterly damning card. No further questions for this witness, Anya said. As Graham stepped down, he shot Ken a look of pure venom. It was a promise. The real attack was yet to come. The courtroom's atmosphere shifted when Franklin Davies called his next witness. The air grew heavier, charged with a different kind of tension, not just legal, but deeply, woundingly personal. The petitioner calls Miss Bianca Reed to the stand. Bianca rose from her seat in the gallery. Every eye was on her. She moved with a liquid grace, her cream-colored dress flowing around her. She was acutely aware of her role in this drama, and she played it to perfection. She avoided looking at Ken, instead focusing on the witness box as if it were a sacred space. As she took the oath, her voice was soft but clear, a gentle melody in the harsh, discordant opera of the courtroom. Ken felt a wave of nausea. This was the woman who had slept in her bed, who had used her shower, who had laughed with her husband in the home she had built. And now she was here to testify that she could be a better mother to Ken's son. The humiliation was a physical thing, a hot poker twisting in her gut. Davies approached his witness with the reverence of a priest. Ms. Reed, thank you for being here. Could you please state your relationship to Mr. Graham Palmer? Graham and I are in a committed, loving relationship, Bianca said, directing a warm, brief smile at Graham. We plan to be married as soon as his divorce is finalized. The words were a calculated stab at Ken, a public declaration of her replacement. And you've had the opportunity to spend time with his son, Leo? Yes, many times, Bianca said, her tone becoming even softer, infused with a maternal warmth that sounded unnervingly genuine. He's a wonderful sweet boy, so bright and funny. How would you describe Leo's interactions with his father? Oh, he adores Graham. Bianca gushed. His whole face lights up when Graham walks into a room. Graham is so patient with him, so engaged. They build these incredible Lego creations, and Graham explains the engineering principles to him. It's beautiful to watch. Ken gripped the edge of her table. Graham hadn't built Legos with Leo in years. He'd buy the most expensive sets, open the box, and then get a work call, leaving Ken or Leo to finish it alone. The man Bianca was describing was a fantasy, a carefully constructed character for the court's benefit. And how does Leo seem when he is with you? Davies prompted. He was a little shy at first, naturally. Bianca said, a picture of understanding. But he's warmed up to me. We read stories. I've been teaching him a little French. He's very quick, I think. I think he craves a calm, gentle energy in his life. The implication was clear, the calm, gentle energy that Ken, the hysterical mother, could not provide. Ms. Reed, Mr. Palmer has testified that should he be granted custody, you would be taking on a significant caregiving role. Are you prepared for that responsibility? Completely, Bianca said, her voice firm with conviction. I want nothing more. To be a mother has always been my dream. I would dedicate myself entirely to Leo's well-being. We would have a home filled with peace, creativity, and learning. I've already been researching the best tutors, the best summer camps. Graham and I want to give him a world of security and opportunity. She was flawless, articulate, poised, and full of loving promises. To an outsider, to Judge Carmichael, she must have sounded like the ideal stepmother. Ken watched the judge's face, but it remained an unreadable mask of neutrality. "And you are aware of Leo's severe nut allergy?" Davies asked. "Yes, of course," Bianca said, her expression turning serious. "It's something Graham and I have discussed at length. His safety would be my absolute #1 priority. I've taken online courses in allergy management, and I've memorized the protocol for using an EpiPen. I would ensure our home is a completely safe, nut-free sanctuary. Every label would be checked, every meal prepared with the utmost care." It was the perfect answer. Textbook. Rehearsed. Ken could almost hear Graham coaching her, drilling the words into her head over a glass of expensive wine in their pristine, minimalist apartment. Davies smiled, satisfied. "Thank you, Miss Reed." No further questions. He returned to his seat, giving Graham a subtle, triumphant nod. They believed they had sealed the deal. They had presented the perfect alternative, the calm, wealthy, prepared new mother ready to step in where the old, broken one had failed. Now it was Anya's turn. She rose, her file in her hand, and approached the witness box. She didn't radiate hostility, but a quiet, intense curiosity. "Good morning, Miss Reed," Anya began. "You have a background in art history, is that correct?" "Yes. I have a master's degree from Sotheby's Institute," Bianca answered, a touch of pride in her voice. "An impressive achievement. And what do you do for a living now?" I am not currently employed," Bianca said, a slight hesitation. "I'm focusing on building a home with Graham. So for the past year and a half, since your relationship with Mr. Palmer began, you have not worked." "That's correct. Mr. Palmer provides for you financially. Your apartment, your car, your expenses." "Graham is very generous," Bianca said stiffly. "I'm sure he is," Anya said, letting the words hang for a moment. "Ms. Reed, you testified that Leo adores his father. You mentioned they build Legos together." "Yes, they do. Are you familiar with the Lego Starry Night set? It's based on the Van Gogh painting. Given your art history background, it seems like something you'd appreciate." "It's a lovely set," Bianca agreed, looking slightly confused. "It is. Leo received it for his birthday last year. Did you and Graham build it with him?" I believe we were traveling then," Bianca hedged. "But Graham makes sure Leo has all the best things. So you didn't see my client, Kendra Palmer, spend 3 consecutive evenings on the floor with her son, patiently helping him sort through the 2-3-16 pieces, explaining how the artist's brushstrokes were being recreated in plastic bricks. Objection assumes facts, not in evidence," Davies said, sounding bored. "I'll rephrase," Anya said smoothly. "Let's move on. You mentioned reading with Leo. What's his favorite book series right now?" Bianca smiled, relieved to be on firmer ground. "He loves the Magic Tree House books. We're reading one about ancient Egypt. That's wonderful." "And who is his best friend at school?" Noah Bianca answered promptly. Another point for her. Graham had clearly prepped her with a cheat sheet of Leo's basic information. "Correct," Anya said. "And what is Noah's last name?" Bianca's smile faltered. I don't recall at the moment. It's Goldberg. His mother, Sarah. Goldberg is one of Miss Palmer's closest friends. Have you ever met her?" "No. Have you ever arranged a playdate for Leo and Noah? Number Kendra usually handles that." "I see." Anya paused, letting the silence magnify the admission. "Let's turn to the more serious matter of Leo's allergy. You said you've taken courses and memorized protocols. That's very responsible. I take it very seriously, Bianca affirmed, regaining her confidence. Good. So you know what anaphylaxis looks like, the difficulty breathing, the swelling, the hives. Yes, of course, and you know what to do. You call 911, you administer the epinephrine auto-injector. You stay with the child. Yes, exactly. But as any parent of a child with a severe allergy knows, Ms. Reed, the key is not just knowing how to react to a full-blown crisis. It's about recognizing the very first subtle signs of a reaction to prevent it from getting to that stage. It's about vigilance. I understand that Bianca said, her posture stiffening. So tell me, Anya, said, her voice dropping, slightly becoming more focused, more intimate. What are the specific ingredients in the sun butter that Leo prefers? The brand my client has to special order, because it's the only one manufactured in a dedicated nut-free facility that doesn't have the gritty texture he dislikes. Bianca blinked. I'm not sure of the brand name. But I would, of course, only buy products that are certified nut-free. Of course, Anya echoed, her tone flat. And when Leo eats something he's unsure about, he has a tell. A small, almost imperceptible habit he does with his tongue. A little tick. A parent who has watched him like a hawk for 7 years would know it instantly. Can you describe it for the court? Bianca was now staring at Anya like a deer in the headlights. Her carefully constructed facade was beginning to crack. I haven't noticed anything like that. Graham was leaning forward, whispering urgently to Davis. Ken held her breath. Anya was peeling back the layers, moving past the rehearsed script and into the real, messy, detailed world of actually knowing a child. She was showing the court the vast, unbridgeable chasm between a textbook and a mother's heart. Anya took a step closer to the witness box. She wasn't finished yet. The trap was set. Now it was time for it to be sprung, but it wouldn't be Anya who would deliver the final blow. From the bench, Judge Carmichael leaned forward, her pen poised. She had been watching, listening, and had a question of her own. Judge Carmichael adjusted the small microphone in front of her. The quiet click silenced the rustling papers and whispered conferences in the courtroom. All attention snapped to the bench. The judge had a reputation for letting the lawyers run their course, intervening only when necessary. Her direct involvement signaled a turning point. She looked down at Bianca Reed, her expression as neutral as carved stone, but her eyes held a penetrating intensity. Ms. Reed, the judge, began, her voice calm and authoritative, cutting through the tension. I have just one question for you, and I'd like you to be very specific in your answer. Please do not generalize. Bianca sat up straighter, a nervous energy now radiating from her. She glanced at Graham, but he could offer no help. This was unscripted. You have testified at length, Judge Carmichael continued, about your preparedness to care for Leo, particularly in regards to his life-threatening allergy. You have described the catastrophic late-stage symptoms of anaphylaxis. I want to talk about the beginning. The judge paused, letting the weight of her preamble settle. Miss Reed, my question is this. Can you please describe in precise detail the appearance of the rash that manifests on Leo's skin during his initial, mild allergic reaction to accidental cross-contamination? I am not referring to the large, obvious hives of a major reaction. I am referring to the very first telltale sign a diligent primary caregiver watching closely would notice. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a silence so profound that Ken could hear the frantic thumping of her own heart. It was a brilliant question. It wasn't about love or wealth or promises. It was about knowledge, the kind of knowledge that cannot be memorized from a website or a pamphlet. The kind of knowledge that is earned through sleepless nights, through panicked examinations, under a nightlight, through the visceral, all-consuming terror and intimacy of motherhood. Bianca Reed froze. Her perfectly made-up face went blank. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving 2 spots of rosy blush standing out in stark relief. Her mind was clearly racing, searching the carefully curated files of information Graham had supplied her. The cheat sheet didn't cover this. "Well, Your Honor," she began, her voice a little too high, a little too thin. "It would be a rash. Redness on the skin, perhaps some small bumps, like hives. Be more specific." "Ms. Reed," the judge pressed her voice, unyielding. "Where does it typically first appear? What is the texture? The color? The pattern?" Bianca's eyes darted around the room, a caged animal looking for an escape. I would assume around his mouth if he'd eaten something. And it would be red and blotchy. It was a guess, a good guess, but a guess nonetheless. It was the generic textbook answer of a stranger. Judge Carmichael held her gaze for a long moment, then made a note on her legal pad. Without looking up, she said, "Thank you, Ms. Reed. You may remain there." She then shifted her gaze across the courtroom, her eyes landing on Ken. "Ms. Palmer, I will ask you the same question. Please describe the rash." Anya gave Ken's hand a gentle squeeze under the table. Ken took a deep, shuddering breath. This was her territory. This was the landscape of her deepest fears and her fiercest love. She didn't need to think. She just needed to remember. She stood up, her voice, trembling at first, but gaining strength with every word. "Your Honor." She began making eye contact with the judge. "The first sign isn't on his skin. The first sign is that he swallows twice hard. Then he touches his tongue to the roof of his mouth, a little habit he has when he feels that first tingle." She saw from the corner of her eye Graham's head snap towards her. He'd never noticed that. Then the rash begins. Ken continued, her voice now clear and steady, the memory vivid and terrifying. "It's not red, not at first. It's a series of very small, pale bumps, almost white. They look like tiny scattered grains of sand under his skin, and it doesn't start around his mouth. For Leo, it always starts in one specific place, the soft skin of his left temple, right where his hair begins." She pointed to her own temple. "It appears there first, a small patch no bigger than a dime. Then, if the reaction is progressing, a faint pinkness will start to creep into the skin between the bumps. At the same time, his right eyelid, always the right one first, will get a tiny bit puffy. Not swollen shut, just heavier. It's a look I know better than I know my own face in the mirror." As she spoke, the sterile courtroom dissolved. She was no longer a petitioner in a lawsuit. She was a mother. Her love, her terror, her intimate, all-encompassing knowledge of her child filled the space so palpable it was almost a physical force. She wasn't performing. She was testifying from the heart of her lived experience. Only after that, she finished, her voice thick with emotion, do the red, blotchy hives appear elsewhere. But if you catch it at the pale bump stage on his temple, you can often manage it with a dose of Benadryl and avoid the EpiPen, the ambulance, the hospital. You can avoid the trauma. She sat down, her body trembling with the adrenaline of reliving those moments. The courtroom was utterly still. In that one detailed, heartfelt answer, Ken had demonstrated more about her fitness as a parent than 1,000 pages of legal documents ever could. She had proven that she wasn't just a caregiver. She was Leo's expert, his guardian, the archivist of his every vulnerability. Bianca Reed looked as if she had been slapped. The color had not returned to her face. She looked at Graham, her expression a mixture of humiliation and dawning horror, as if seeing for the first time the sheer depth of the life she was trying to usurp. She was an amateur trying to play a professional's game, and she had just been devastatingly outclassed. Graham's face was a mask of cold fury. His perfect plan, his carefully constructed narrative, had been obliterated, not by a legal argument, but by a mother's truth. The mistress he had brought to court to seal his victory had instead become the instrument of his humiliation. Judge Carmichael looked from Ken to Bianca, and then to Graham. She picked up her pen and made another longer note on her pad. The air crackled. Everyone in the room knew the tide had just irrevocably turned, but Graham Palmer was not a man who accepted defeat. Ken saw the look he gave Franklin Davies, a sharp, angry glare. It wasn't over. He had an ace up his sleeve. A final, cruel twist of the knife, designed not just to win but to utterly destroy her. The momentum in the courtroom had shifted so dramatically, it was almost a physical force. Anya Sharma sat beside Ken, a small, triumphant smile on her face. They had done it. They had exposed the hollowness of Graham's case. Ken allowed herself a fragile flicker of hope, the first she had felt in months. But the look on Graham's face snuffed it out like a candle in a gale. This wasn't the expression of a man who had lost. It was the expression of a man whose fury had just been ignited. He leaned over and spoke to Franklin Davies in a low, vicious hiss. Davies, who had looked momentarily shaken, straightened his tie, his professional composure snapping back into place. The shark had smelled blood, and it wasn't Graham's. Your Honor, Davies said, rising to his feet with renewed purpose. While the petitioner acknowledges Ms. Palmer's detailed familiarity with her son's condition, the core issue of stability remains. And that Your Honor is not just emotional, it is financial. Judge Carmichael raised an eyebrow. Get to the point, Mr. Davies. The petitioner would like to present one final piece of evidence, which we believe speaks volumes about Miss Palmer's character, her motivations, and her profound financial instability. He walked to the clerk and handed over a sheaf of documents. They were distributed to the judge and to Anya. Ken watched a cold dread creeping up her spine. What now? What other part of her life had Graham twisted into a weapon? Anya scanned the first page, and her face went rigid. She pushed the document in front of Ken. It was a bank statement from a private account at a small boutique bank Ken had never heard of, Sterling Trust and Fiduciary. The account was in her name, Kendra Marie Palmer, and according to the statement 2 months ago, just 1 week before she was served with divorce papers, a wire transfer for $250,000 had been moved into it from her and Graham's joint marital account. As the court can see, Davies announced, his voice booming with righteous indignation. This is a statement for a secret bank account opened by Ms. Palmer. On May 17th of this year, she transferred $250,000 from the couple's joint funds into this private account. This was an act of deliberate, calculated financial deception. She was planning to leave, and she was looting the marital assets on her way out the door. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Ken stared at the paper, her mind reeling. It was impossible. She hadn't done this. She wouldn't even know how. This document is a forgery, Ken whispered, horrified. It is a certified bank record, Your Honor, Davies said coolly. We have also submitted the transfer authorization form. A copy was passed to them. There at the bottom of the form was her signature. Or what looked exactly like her signature. It was perfect. This is the action of a gold digger, not a victim, Davies pressed on his voice, dripping with contempt. She portrays herself as a wronged wife, but the evidence shows she is a manipulative and untrustworthy individual. How can she be trusted with the well-being of a child when she engages in such blatant fraud? She is financially reckless and morally bankrupt. Granting her custody would be rewarding this deception. Ken felt the floor drop out from under her. This was Graham's checkmate. He had anticipated losing on the emotional front, so he had created an escape hatch, a lie so profound and well documented that it was impossible to refute. He was painting her not just as an unstable mother, but as a criminal. Ms. Sharma Judge Carmichael's voice was stern. This was a serious allegation, and the evidence looked damning. Your Honor, my client denies this completely. Anya said her mind, clearly working a mile a minute. She had no knowledge of this account or this transfer. We ask for a brief recess to confer. Granted. 15 minutes, the judge said, her gaze lingering on Ken with a new, unwelcome glint of suspicion. As soon as they were in the hallway, Ken's composure shattered. Anya, I swear to you, I didn't do this. I don't know where that money is. I've never even heard of that bank. I believe you, Ken. Anya said, her voice a calm anchor in Ken's storm of panic. But they have a signature. Think. Did you sign anything for Graham around that time? Any documents at all? Ken paced the sterile hallway, her hands pressed to her temples. Her mind was a blur of betrayal and fear. He was always making me sign things. Investment papers, tax forms. He'd just put a stack in front of me and say, sign here, here, and here. He'd be on his phone, impatient. I trusted him. Oh God, I was so stupid. She stopped dead. A memory surfaced hazy at first, then sharpening into painful focus. It was late one evening in May. Graham had come home late, smelling of a perfume that wasn't hers. He'd been curt and dismissive. Before going to his study, he'd dropped a leather-bound folder on the kitchen island. Need you to sign these, he'd said without looking at her. It's for the Delaware property refinance. Has to be couriered by morning. She'd been tired and heartsick. She'd flipped through the pages, dense legalese numbers, property deeds. She'd signed where the yellow sticky tabs told her to. He must have slipped the transfer form into that stack, a single treacherous page hidden among dozens of legitimate ones. He slipped it into a pile of property documents. She told Anya, the words choking her. But how do we prove it? It's my signature against a bank record. They were trapped. Graham's lie was perfect. He had used her trust her own hand to condemn her. She was going to lose Leo, and she would be branded a thief in the process. As Ken leaned against the wall, utterly defeated, Anya's phone buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. Anya glanced at it, her brow furrowing. The text read, I need to talk to you. About Graham. It's important. BR. Anya's eyes widened. BR. Bianca Reed. What is it? Ken asked, seeing the look on her lawyer's face. It's Bianca. Anya said, a note of disbelief in her voice. She wants to talk. Now. Anya quickly typed a reply, directing her to a small, empty conference room at the end of the hall. A minute later, Bianca slipped into the room, looking pale and shaken. She had shed the poise and confidence she'd worn on the witness stand. Now she just looked scared. Why are you doing this? Ken asked, her voice raw. Bianca wouldn't meet her eyes. She looked at Anya. What he just did in there. With the bank account. I didn't know he was going to do that. He told me it was his insurance policy. What do you know about it? Anya asked, her tone all business. Bianca wrung her hands. I don't know everything, but I know he was bragging. A few weeks ago, he was on the phone with his financial guy, a man named Peter Lynch. Graham was laughing. He said something like, Ken will never see it coming. The signature is a perfect match. Even if she gets a good lawyer, the paper trail will bury her. He called it severance pay. she'd never get to spend. This was it. A crack in the fortress. Why are you telling us this? Anya pressed her gaze sharp. Bianca finally looked at Ken, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Because the way he looked when your answer about the rash destroyed him. It wasn't just anger. It was inhuman. I realized he isn't just trying to win. He's trying to annihilate you. And he used me to do it. He made me look like a fool. I see now that if he's willing to do that to the mother of his child, what would he do to me when he gets tired of me? It wasn't an act of conscience. It was an act of self-preservation. Bianca Reed had finally realized she wasn't Graham's partner. She was just his next victim. That phone call with Peter Lynch. Anya said, her voice urgent. Do you remember when it was a date? A time Bianca thought for a moment. Yes. It was a Tuesday night, June 24th, around 8 p.m. We were at his apartment. I remember because my favorite show was on, and he was being so loud on the phone I had to leave the room. Anya's fingers flew across her phone's keyboard. June 24th. Peter Lynch. She looked up, a glint of steel in her eyes. It might not be enough to prove it today, but it's enough to blow his case wide open. The bailiff called from the end of the hall. Recess is over. Stay here, Anya told Bianca. Then she turned to Ken. Don't say a word. Let me handle this. The war isn't over yet. They walked back into the courtroom. Ken's despair had been replaced by a new, ferocious hope. Graham Palmer thought he had built the perfect trap. He just never imagined the bait would be the one to help her escape. The courtroom hummed with an expectant hush as they resumed their seats. Graham Palmer wore the smug look of a man who had already won. He believed the fraudulent bank statement was his checkmate. Ms. Sharma, Judge Carmichael's voice was stern. Does your client have any response to this evidence? Anya Sharma rose, her posture radiating a new, sharp confidence. Yes, Your Honor. My client maintains that her signature was obtained by fraud, and we now have reason to believe we know how to prove it. Davies scoffed. Your Honor, this is a desperate, baseless accusation. On the contrary, Anya said, her voice ringing with clarity. We move to immediately subpoena the phone records of Mr. Graham Palmer and his associate Mr. Peter Lynch, specifically for the evening of June 24th. Graham's smirk vanished. He shot a panicked, furious look toward the gallery, where Bianca's seat now sat empty. He understood instantly. He'd been betrayed. Davies scrambled to his feet. Objection. This is a fishing expedition. It's irrelevant and highly prejudicial, the basis, Your Honor. Anya countered, her voice, cutting through the room, is a good faith belief that those records will contain evidence of a conversation in which Mr. Palmer and Mr. Lynch discussed the plan to fabricate the very documents just presented to this court, a plan Mr. Palmer allegedly referred to as his insurance policy against my client. The courtroom was stunned into silence. It was a direct accusation of conspiracy and perjury. Judge Carmichael stared down at Graham, her gaze cold and piercing. The pieces were clicking into place, the arrogant testimony, the hollow mistress, and now a fraud designed as a knockout blow. Mr. Davies, the judge, said, her voice dangerously quiet. Your client submitted a sworn declaration that all his financial disclosures were accurate. If Ms. Sharma's allegations are true, he has committed perjury and attempted to defraud this court. The request is highly relevant. Motion granted. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that echoed like a gunshot. It was the sound of Graham Palmer's world breaking apart. The bluff had been called. Davies, seeing the ruin before them, turned to the bench, his voice strained. Your Honor, may we request a meeting in chambers? A very wise request, Judge Carmichael said. The meeting was not a negotiation. It was a surrender. Faced with the certainty of incriminating phone records and the testimony of a scorned mistress, Graham's case had evaporated. An hour later, they returned to the courtroom. Judge Carmichael took her seat, her face a thundercloud. A settlement has been reached. Mr. Palmer has withdrawn his petition for sole custody. She paused and looked directly at Graham, who sat rigidly staring at nothing. "Let me be clear," the judge said, her voice resonating with cold fury. "This court is appalled by the petitioner's conduct. He attempted to manipulate the legal system to slander the mother of his child, and to win through fraud what he could not win on merit. He has treated his son as nothing more than a prize to be won." She then turned her gaze to Ken, a flicker of sympathy in her eyes. "The court grants Ms. Kendra Palmer sole legal and physical custody of Leo Palmer. Mr. Palmer will be granted supervised visitation contingent upon his completion of court-mandated anger management and parenting courses. The family home will be signed over to Ms. Palmer. A significant alimony and child support settlement has also been reached. It was a total unconditional victory." Tears of pure relief streamed down Ken's face. Anya wrapped a supportive arm around her shoulders. Across the aisle, Graham Palmer sat alone, a shrunken figure in his expensive suit. The power and charm had been stripped away, leaving behind something small and defeated. He had tried to destroy her life, and had only succeeded in demolishing his own. As Ken and Anya walked out of the courtroom into the bright light of the afternoon, Ken knew she was finally free. She was a survivor. And she was and would always be Leo's mother, a title no man, no mistress, and no amount of money could ever take from her. The courtroom doors swung shut, not as an end, but as a beginning. Kendra's story is a powerful reminder that in the face of overwhelming power, wealth and deception, the truth holds a unique and explosive force. It wasn't a clever legal trick that won the day. It was the undeniable, fiercely detailed truth of a mother's love. Graham Palmer learned that some things can't be bought, bullied, or faked. Integrity, character, and the sacred bond between a parent and child are not assets to be liquidated. This story shows that the system, for all its flaws, can sometimes deliver true justice. If Kendra's fight for her son moved you, please hit that like button to show your support. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that courage can overcome corruption. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories where truth and justice prevail against all odds. Your support helps us continue to bring these important narratives to light. Thank you for listening.